Let's jump in. Trump versus Powell. So federal prosecutors in D.C., the big news last night was they've opened a criminal investigation into whether Jerome Powell lied to Congress. This obviously centers on what he told The Hill about the bank's renovation of its Washington headquarters. DOJ sent grand jury subpoenas to the Fed on Friday. Now, look, we all know that the president has been going after Powell for a long time, trying to pressure him to lower interest rates more than he already has. But this is obviously a huge escalation. He typically tries to stay above the fray on this, but let's pull up our first element today and take a look at what Powell actually said in response.
I have deep respect for the rule of law and for accountability in our democracy. No one, certainly not the chair of the Federal Reserve, is above the law. But this unprecedented action should be seen in the broader context of the administration's threats and ongoing pressure. This new threat is not about my testimony last June or about the renovation of the Federal Reserve buildings. It is not about Congress's oversight role. The Fed, through testimony and other public disclosures, made every effort to keep Congress informed about the renovation project. Those are pretexts. The threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on our best assessment of what will serve the public, rather than following the preferences of the president.
Dan, start first with how rare it is to see Powell actually respond to Trump, number one, but also in a formal video like that. But also, is he going to have a job by State of the Union? Over and under bet.
Yeah, I mean, two different questions there. Look, it is unprecedented, just like traditionally judges don't respond to political attacks. Independent agency heads don't respond to political attacks. But I think one of Trump's, kind of tactics is he knows they're not traditionally one to respond. So it's like smacking somebody around who has their hands tied behind their back and, a muzzle over their mouth. I would just say to both of you, is there anything Jerome Powell said that isn't true? There isn't. I mean, that's the thing that we're all going to sit there and say, but it's Trump. It's always the next statement. So look, I think he will be gone. State of the Union, maybe shortly thereafter. I'd say sometime between, spring break and then. But I mean, look, I've said this kind of over the last 14 hours. I think Republicans will rue the day if this goes through that the president of the United States took over interest rates. I just think it's terrible for our economy. Nobody should want it. Everyone is human. Donald Trump is not right about everything, as he likes to kind of brag, or his supporters like to say. And I think the idea that the president of the United States will now control the central bank is what happens in banana republics.
Sean, is this a little overkill here? I mean, typically it's Congress that is the one pushing and referring DOJ to investigate or charge somebody with lying to Congress. It's not usually the administration itself that's the one pushing that. Lawmakers on the Hill are not doing this. This is 100% a Trump admin-led thing. Is it overkill?
So the interesting thing about this was how it all went down. And I think I just want to make sure everyone, Powell kind of called this out, right? It wasn't like Trump announced it. Or Jeanine Pirro announced it, or Congress announced it, to your point. Powell did it. And this is what I think is interesting. To Dan's point, it was a Sunday Fed response, no glasses, full video. It wasn't a statement. I mean, this is, if you talk about calibrating where things are, for the Fed to do a video, not a statement, he had full, this was full glam, Jerome Powell style, as far as he goes. But
in a gray suit, gray tie.
Yeah, great. This was he was like, do you want me to amp it up more? That's as excited as he gets. But a Sunday video out of the Fed, full glam, that's him screaming. And I think he exposed this for a reason, because he wanted to get ahead of it. But this wasn't the Trump administration announcing it. And so that's what I found fascinating about the way this all went down. Remember, this is critical for everyone who understands this. The statute is cause. He doesn't have to be convicted of anything. And so if you think about your own employment, if your employer comes to you and says, hey, you're not dressing appropriately, or the way that you're talking to employees isn't appropriate, you can be fired for that. It's cause. And there's a different standard when it comes to this position. So I think people have to keep that in mind. If the president just establishes the predicate, was their cause. It wasn't that you lied to Congress. It's that you had massive overruns, mismanaged, and whatever. He doesn't have to be convicted of anything. That's the difference in this case that people have to understand. Third, the Lisa Cook case is still before the court, and that will determine a lot of this. If the court rules that that Cook can't be fired, I don't think they'll go down this avenue. And this leads to my last point. I don't think he's going to get fired. And I'll tell you why. I thought about this. Think about the president's response. And I went and looked at this again in the last few minutes. Like, Trump on Air Force One said, that's not how I want it to go down, right? In other words, when he was asked about it, informed that Jeanine Pirro had opened this case, he could have said, well, you know, the Powell deserves it, blah, blah, blah. He didn't. He said, that's not how I want it to go down.
I think that's because he's seeing the reaction. I mean, Sean, let me ask you this. Do you think that Susie Wiles and the senior staff had no idea that Jeanine Pirro did this?
I can see a situation. I mean, if you think about all of the scenarios that have happened in the past couple of months where people went out and said, I think I know what the president wants. Look, I saw this in Trump 1. People think they know what he wants.
But not in this administration.
No,
this
but I also think
very well run.
Jeanine Pirro has been a judge before, and I think I could see a scenario where she says, I don't want him to know what I'm doing because I think there'll be a conflict, and Powell could use that and say there's political coordination. I could see an honest scenario where she says, I'm going to do this, because remember, she didn't announce this. I think that the idea was maybe to establish the case and then maybe go to him and say, hey, we've got this case. What do you want us to do?
The senior staff. So you think the senior staff at the White House had no idea that Jeanine Pirro, this is a White House where
I get it. No, Dan, I'm well aware.
Blow your nose without permission and you're in the penalty box. But against his number one target, they had no idea.
Okay, so this is where we're going to find out today if there's back channeling leaks that come out that say we were caught off guard by this. She did this on her own. She didn't have our look. How many things have we seen in the last 6-8 months where somebody went out and freelanced something under the guise of, I think the president wants me to do this, and then got their hands smacked? I wouldn't be surprised if this happened. But to your point, Dan, this is kind of like, remember when I was there and we fired Comey, the idea was everybody hates Comey, so they'll applaud if we do this. I'm not sure even the people who don't like Powell may argue that, hey, I don't like him, I want him replaced, but I don't want it done in this way.
What does Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent do here? I mean, obviously, Sean, he has been a voice in the president's ear saying, don't fire him. Let's not go there.
Again, this goes back to what I just said a second ago, which is I actually think the way the president reacted to this, I wouldn't be surprised if he says, if Bessent checks in with him and says, hey, just want to make sure we're on the same page on Powell. And the president says, yeah, I don't like the guy. I'm going to replace him, but I don't need to get into another like legal jam. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if the president's head's already there and it's not some kind of convincing.
Another thought on this, watch lawmakers on Capitol Hill. We've talked about it before in recent days. A lot more sort of pushback from the Hill right now when it comes to congressional Republicans.
Well, not just pushback, right? We talked about this morning when we were on News Nation, but Tom Tillis, who's on the banking committee, has already come out and said, no way. I don't think there's any question where Murkowski is. And now you're down to you got two more to spare. I could easily see a world where McConnell comes out just because. 100%. And then Collins, I actually think could be interested because you talked about this last week, Dan, but like the smackdown that she got on use of military force could be hey, you did it once, let's not do this again.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And just a reminder that Tillis has veto authority on the Senate Banking Committee. He's not only criticizing this, he's saying he will not support any other nominees for the Fed at this point.
I mean, they can bring it straight to the floor, but that would be, a pretty big thumb at your own conference.